Hello, everyone. Welcome to Fishin, the podcast where we discuss Magic's most competitive tribe and help the whole community become better Merfolk players. I'm Kody, one of the co-hosts of the show, and not Kody Smith on Twitter. And today I am joined by
Dorian Ayala. You can find me at Crinkle Biscuit with a K on Twitter.
And of course, you can find Matthew on Twitter as at MatthewCaudill8. He is continuing to pursue higher education, so we'll overlook his absence this time. But next time he'll get a demerit slip for sure.
Yep. Be crying into his $100 bill handkerchief.
Oh yeah. Well, he'll have college problems after this, so that's kind of his comeuppance. Remember that you can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all that fun stuff. And make sure to comment and subscribe and like us in all the places because it really does help us out a lot as a show. Get some clout in the community and all that fun stuff. And remember, you can go to our link in the description for our Inked Gaming kind of like website hyperlink thing. So when you click on that and use that as your way to get to Inked Gaming, you get 10% off your order and kick back some of that over to your buddies here at Fishin. And you can also get our tokens from Cardamajigs because that's a great place to support us. Unless you want to support us on Patreon. Patreon.com/fishcastmtg is where you can support a show, get the show ad-free and a few days early. That's pretty neat. But yeah, so that's pretty much all the normal business stuff. Dorian, do you want to pick the random Merfolk this week?
Yes, I had picked the number 179, and that pulled up Seascape Aerialist. It is a Merfolk Wizard ally for 4 and a blue that has whenever Seascape Aerialist or another ally enters the battlefield under your control, you may have ally creatures you control gain flying until end of turn. And it itself is a 2/3, so this was a pretty fun, limited, I don't know if I would call it a limited bomb, but definitely limited support for the 5-color, up to 5-color ally deck that you could build.
Yeah, and it seems like this honestly could be a game ender. If you untap and you rip this off the top of your deck and just drop it and then send up, maybe let's say even half of your creatures. Send up half your creatures in the air, and that can kind of, I guess, give you that that breathing room to just kind of close out a game. But outside of the specifically Zendikar Limited, I don't know if I can recommend this card.
Probably not. You would need to be building a dedicated ally deck, and unlike the Battle for Zendikar fix that ally creatures gave, this one was only specific to other allies, so you had to be a dedicated ally deck versus the Battle for Zendikar where it was all creatures.
Yeah, and ally decks are fun, but again, this wouldn't really fit well into a Merfolk deck unless we were running something to change all of our Merfolk into allies. This is just too narrow for me.
Yeah. For sure. So, moving on.
Yeah, moving on to the main event here. We're going to be talking a little bit about Standard, and I know that's kind of weird because we haven't touched Standard since we've been back doing the show. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to see what we can do with Merfolk in Standard, in the current Standard at least.
Yes. I'm actually a lot happy with Standard now. There's a lot more diversity in decks, not a lot of elks running around anymore, so that's another amazing thing to see.
Yes, it has opened up a metagame that there's there's a few different things that people can do. Even though there's some very strong decks and some of the decks we're going to talk about this episode. But there are there's just a lot of options. You can play pretty much whatever you want and do kind of okay. This deck is no exception to that because this deck is not a top tier list. But it's just a ton of fun to play.
Yes, this list is definitely more in my lane of, or my style of play. It is going to be like one of the more just like fringe. I'm going to call it a janky like combo brew, but I mean you've been doing pretty well with it, so that's actually something I'm really excited to be discussing on. Since it's your deck and all, you go ahead and introduce us into the deck tech.
Yeah, and I do want to say that I'll probably be streaming this deck this weekend, so that would be let's see here. Today's the 4th of February, so it'd probably be like the 8th ish or the 9th. Sometime this weekend I'll be streaming it. And it's a really fun deck to play. So we're gonna start off with the lands because the mana base is pretty easy. It's 16 islands and 4 watery graves. It's pretty straightforward. We need lots of islands because we're a Merfolk deck, right?
Yes.
So this deck runs 2 Merfolk, a playset of each. The first one is Merfolk Secret Keeper. Now, this is definitely a Throne of Eldraine card, but that is totally fine because it is a Merfolk, and so it has a sorcery adventure where target player puts the top 4 cards of their library into their graveyard, and then it's just blue mana for a 0/4 Merfolk Wizard. Seems pretty good, right?
Yep. The adventure is the thing that we're definitely building around, but once that's gone off, you have, like just a brick wall for a couple of turns afterwards.
Yeah, it's got a big butt, so it does block a lot of decks, especially decks like Red Deck Wins and a lot of the Jund food decks that play a lot of like Ginger Brutes and a lot of things that are just really hasty and quick. This thing can just sit and block all day, so kind of preserving your life total, being basically just like a stone wall. So yeah, it's a great card, but like you said, we're kind of mostly using it for the sorcery. The next Merfolk is one from this most recent set, and it's Thassa's Oracle. It's blue for a 1/3 Merfolk Wizard, and when it enters the battlefield, you look at the top X cards of your library, where X is your devotion to blue. So Thassa's Oracle adds blue, so that's 2 by itself. But then it can kind of get buffed up by all these Merfolk Secret Keepers we have, as well as an enchantment in the deck. And you may look at the top X cards, and then you pick a card and put it on top, and then put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order, I believe. Yes, in a random order. So X, if the number X is bigger than the amount of cards you have left in your library, then you just win.
Yes. That is everything that this deck is looking to just, jump forward into, for the most part, wanting to, what's the word? Essentially race to this combo finish.
Yes, so Thassa's Oracle is kind of a big part of this deck, but the other big part of this deck is the other set of creatures that we have in here. So this deck only runs 12 creatures. We've already discussed Merfolk Secret Keeper and Thassa's Oracle, but this deck also plays Arclight Phoenix, which is 3 in a red for a 3/2 Phoenix with flying and haste. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if you've cast 3 or more instants of sorcery spells, you may return Arclight Phoenix from your graveyard to the battlefield. So, the other part of this deck is basically milling yourself very quickly. And the way we do that is we have lots of cards that are commonly referred to as cantrips in Magic. Basically, we get to draw a card with almost every single card that gets played. So, like, for instance, Opt, which you pay blue, you look at the top card of your library, so scry one, and then draw a card. So that's a card that counts as an instant sorcery, but automatically replaces itself. So we're running 4 of Opt, 4 Unsummon, 3 Mission Briefing. Mission Briefing is kind of a complicated card. So you surveil 2, so you look at the top 2 cards of your library, and you can put them in the graveyard if you want to, or back on top of your library. Um, and then you choose an instant or sorcery in your graveyard, and you can cast that until the end of turn. So it's basically giving new life to your ops and your unsummons. There's also a maximize altitude, but that's basically only for a way to discard things from your hand, like, say, spare Arclight Phoenixes, should they, magically appear in your hand. Because the deck has no way of casting the Arclight Phoenixes, so we need them in the graveyard. The next card is Radical Idea, which is 1 and a blue to draw a card, and then it has Jumpstart, which basically means you can pay its cost and discard a card to cast it from your graveyard. Basically another way to pitch Arclight Phoenixes to the graveyard. And then a really big part of this deck is 4 of an enchantment called Drowned Secrets. And basically it says whenever you cast a blue spell, target player puts the top 2 cards of their library into their graveyard. So we're kind of operating on 2 fronts here. We're operating on the front of possibly winning off of Thassa's Oracle combo, or we just cast a bunch of instants and sorceries, which mills us by putting Arclight Phoenixes into the graveyard, and then casting those 3 instants of sorceries, so that way we can get Arclight Phoenix onto the battlefield and sending damage downrange.
Yes, and Arclight Phoenix is pretty good recursion to keep a clock going as well. We saw that kind of happen a lot with the is it Phoenix decks in I want to say like before Throne of Eldraine came out.
Yeah, we've had these Phoenix decks around for a while on Standard, but it's just such a powerful card. It really is.
This is definitely just another home for it, even though it's not a dedicated Izzet deck. It's at least a deck that is going to make use of the self mill and cheap spells to keep going and just recur Phoenixes out of the graveyard.
Yes. Honestly, either way is viable. But I do want to talk about the last couple cards that we have in here. We also have Creeping Chill, which is 3 and a black for a sorcery. And it says Creeping Chill deals 3 damage to each opponent and you gain 3 life. But it also has a caveat that if it gets put into your graveyard from your library, you can exile it and basically cast it for free. So while we're kind of looping all these cards from our graveyard from our deck into our graveyard, we're also gaining some life back from Shocklands, and also just kind of helping to keep our opponent's life total at a low total.
Yes, I do respect the Creeping Chills being put in here, but I'm not sure if that's the best thing to do, because that takes up 4 slots that we are hoping to mill into and not really support the main strategy, which seems to be getting to Thassa's Oracle as fast as we can.
Yes, so there are it definitely is kind of like a holdover from the original dredge list that we had in Standard. But I do like it. I think that the extra life can help stabilize against a lot of the quicker decks. And it's also just easy to pitch them to a jumpstart, and just not have to deal with them. And sometimes that last Creeping Chill in your hand, can be the difference. You can just untap and cast it. So you're right. I think that's probably the most flexible spot in the deck. But I love it with the pressure of all the Phoenixes, because it just makes every single mill oh no, now I'm at a virtual 4. And it kind of keeps your opponent on their toes a little bit.
Yeah, that makes sense. Me, if I were to kind of get away from the Black Splash with Creeping Chills, and I don't think you've talked about the other one yet, have you?
So the next one is Discovery and Dispersal. So this one is a Dimir card, so it's hybrid blue-black. The main part of it is the discovery side, which is one and either a blue or a black, and you surveil two. So you can look at the top two and put any number of them in your graveyard, and then you draw a card. So that's the main reason is it gives you some card selection. So like you can go, oh well, I can pitch this Creeping Chill, and I can keep this this opt on top, and then you draw into the opt. And the dispersal side is each opponent returns a permanent that's has the greatest CMC of all permanents they control. They return it to their hand, and then they discard a card. I have used the dispersal side almost never. Basically, only as like a life-saving measure, to stop them from being able to like crack back and hit me for a bunch. But generally, the discovery portion could be run in the deck if we were to move away from the black splash.
Yes, and that kind of would be the only reason to run Discovery Dispersal. Like another thing, thinking of, if we wanted to move away from the black splash and probably focus a little bit more on like the traditional Is It colors, like Standard Pass. Watery Grave could be Steam Vent, so we could cast the Arclight Phoenixes. Creeping Chills could be, switched over for like a Wall of Lost Thoughts, which is target player mills for. So, since it's a one, it's one in the blue for an 0/4, so it's basically the Merfolk Secret Keeper, but it costs 2 mana and it's an ETB effect, not first turn mill 4, second turn, I have now an 0/4.
Yeah, and part of that's actually one of the cool things about running Unsummon. So if you're at the point in the game where you are running low on spells to cast, if you have a Merfolk Secret Keeper on the battlefield, you can unsummon the Merfolk Secret Keeper, and then cast the sorcery portion of Merfolk Secret Keeper, the adventure, and that could count for your third spell for that turn. But you could also do that with Well of Lost Dreams, but it just wouldn't have the effect of being the sorcery.
Yes, and that's if we're going, full into the Arclight Phoenix thing. If we're just trying to mill ourselves to get to Thassa's Oracle, I would kind of like to see more of like a turn 1, Merfolk Secret Keeper, turn 2, Well of Lost Thoughts. To get that like engine started, and then, because like at that point, we would be, 7 cards in hand. If we're on the play, that is 7. By turn 2, we'll be like 15 cards deep. Turn on the draw will be 16 cards deep, which is a pretty significant difference. And then if we don't want the dispersal, Discovery Dispersal, we can, make room for that to be like like Narcomoeba, maybe even try to use Narcomoeba plus Phoenixes to get another angle of the deck. It would require some form of, tweaking, brewing, potentially changing up the entire shell, which I don't want to get into just yet.
So actually, that's actually one thing. So I was playing this list before Theros came out, and I basically, instead of Thassa's Oracles, I had Narcomoebas, and it was just like an additional value of, discarding cards out of your hand or milling yourself. So like it was just kind of an extra value creature. But then I basically thought like, well, technically Thassa's Oracle can just win you the game by playing it. At best, Narcomoeba is just a free 1/1. And that's not going to, that's not going to win you the game. I mean, free things are great. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, like Narcomoeba has way more synergy and value in like the older dredge lists or mill lists as well. But like a free chump blocker to help you, survive a couple more turns is kind of where I was coming from.
Oh, no, I understand.
But that being said, like it doesn't have to be Narcomoeba. It can be, Instead of like Discovery Dispersal, you can have like Sweet Oblivion, which is another target player mills 4.
Mm-hmm.
But this one also includes an escape cost of 3 and a blue. So if you're, if you know you're not going to be able to get like a bunch of spells out to recur your phoenixes, you might at least try to like dig yourself a little bit deeper for like a Thassa's Oracle win.
That's fair. That's definitely fair. One of the other things that though is that with Thassa's Oracle in the mix, it makes it so that let's say like, after like 4 or 5 turns, you're playing this deck and, things aren't quite going your way. You're not getting very many instants and sorceries, into, you're not playing them fast enough. You're not filling up your yard fast enough. Well, sometimes playing like a mid-game Thassa's Oracle can dig you to that proper piece that you need. So like you can like hit, off of, you could hit like an opt, let's say. So when you play Thassa's Oracle, you reveal and then you get opt and put it on top of your library. And then that way, the next turn when you untap and you draw that, like based off of what you have in your hand, how far you're able to dig. And so like a mid-game Thassa's Oracle does way more than Narcomoeba does as basically a doorstop.
Yes, and that is something that I cannot overlook as well, because pretty much everybody, like in the Merfolk community, and I would say even outside the Merfolk community, has been talking about its other usefulness and not just, relying solely on the win condition portion of the enter the battlefield effect.
Exactly. It still has it's decently as it's a 1/3, so 3 toughness isn't anything to sneeze at. It does definitely stop a lot of the mono red decks that are playing a lot of 1/1s, and they're playing that Chandra that makes 2 1/1s every turn. So just being able to block and at least take down one of those little dudes, that can't be overlooked.
Yeah, one thing that I'm a little bit worried of with this deck is that if you are relying a little bit on the Thassa's Oracle, trying to get down as low of a library as you can and then win off of it, the only thing I would want to see in this deck is like ways of recurring like a Thassa's Oracle out of the graveyard, either to your hand or into play. Let's see. One other thing, though, that I do want to say in support of the Well of Lost Thoughts is it adds to your devotion, which may or may not help Thassa's Oracle versus the, Creeping Chills, where they kind of just focus on, keeping your life total up.
That's fair. And again, we're also kind of going halvesies on the combo, like I said. One way to win is just to play a bunch of, mill a bunch of Arclight Phoenixes and then just get them out of the yard and just keep kind of recurring them. A lot of the decks with a lot of removal, like the Jund food decks and a lot of the mono red decks as well, they have lots of removal. But with Arclight Phoenix, you can kind of just keep pushing. It's like, all right, cool, they killed one. Good. Wait till next turn, it's back. So one thing I like about this deck against at least against the control matchups is a lot of the cards that we play in this deck aren't worth countering. Things like opts, unsummons, mission briefings, maybe mission briefing, but even in those cases, with our drown secrets, we're still getting cast triggers. So even if they get counted, if they get countered, then we'll still get extra milling off of the drown secrets, and it also still counts towards Arclight Phoenix's ability. So you can just kind of keep casting the spells. You can keep milling yourself and still kind of win off Arclight Phoenix, which I find to be real fun to because most of those blue-white control decks are kind of sitting behind counter spells, and I guess about the same with the Simic Flash decks. They're especially running a lot of blue counter spells with Mystical Dispute and all that. So it can be definitely really easy to kind of work your way around the I guess kind of more classic control decks.
Yes, I agree totally. One thing I am also trying to look up at the same time is the new escape mechanic, because I want to say there was a underworld breach. Each non-land card in your graveyard has escape, which is equal to its mana cost plus exile 3 other cards. This could be a card that we can also look into as a more is it focused Thassa's Oracle build.
Okay, so you're saying in if we take out the creeping chills and replace the drowned secrets for steam vents, and then maybe replace
The water is for steam vents. Take out the creeping chills. The discovery dispersal can stay because it's a surveil 2 draw card, which isn't bad. But if we don't want to use it, there was a wrong page. We either have like Secret Oblivion or Glimpse of Freedom, which is 1 in a blue, mill 4 or 1 in a blue draw card, respectively. With Glimpse of Freedom having an escape of 2 in a blue and then exile 5 other cards.
Okay.
No, and that's if we want to look at a strictly blue red version of this deck and not a blue black, because both I believe are viable, and unfortunately neither are viable.
Viable. We can definitely tell who's a dad here. It's both of us. Yeah. So I mean, I really have been having a lot of fun with this deck, and I after playing it on stream, playing the modern combo build with Pure Sight Marrow and Paradise Mantle.
Yeah.
I had a lot of fun with it in Modern, and I just kind of wanted to try and find a way to make it work in Standard. It's kind of interesting how I think that the Standard version of this deck is better than the Modern version of this deck. And the reason I think that is just because in Standard there isn't any disruption that can stop this deck if you're cooking and you're getting everything going. There really isn't a counterspell that stops it. I mean, if you're behind and you're not drawing cards in the order that you need them, you can kind of run into trouble. But like in Modern, we have Path to Exile, we have Lightning Bolt, and the problem in Modern, like Matt has said, is that it's a 3-card combo, and that can just be really rough.
Yes. One thing, that I was wanting to talk about with Modern 2 is that kind of focusing not so much on the Pure Sight Marrow, but I would say like a traditional Merfolk list, or almost a traditional Merfolk's shell, but then you have Thassa's Oracle plus Drowner of Secrets in there, instead of some other like flex slots. So you can, build up a big board presence, but if you're like stalled or something, you can just EOT like a Drowner of Secrets, vialing it in, and then just mill yourself to a Thassa's Oracle win. Like that's something I try, given the opportunity, but unfortunately I will not be able to be playing Magic online for quite some time. We I'll get into that, I guess, at the end of the show.
Okay, yeah. We'll definitely work on getting some more gameplay up of all these versions of these decks. Again, I'm looking to run this deck this weekend at some point. So what are your favorite decks right now to play in Standard? I mean, have you gotten very much Standard in recently?
Oh no, I have not been able to play Standard or Magic in general since the beginning of this year. But that said, with what I've been keeping up on with Magic, like I said at the beginning, it's a lot more of a wider variety of a lot more wider variety of like deck lists that you can do, and I'm really looking forward to like seeing just how the what was it, like the three different standard eras, from Guilds of Ravnica all the way up to you know God, I'm drawing a blank. All the way up to Theros Beyond Death, and just seeing like how the archetypes have like changed, post Oko, and like all the stuff that they're adding to it, which is to me, I think one of the more fun things to do. And because I mean, you have like this Jund food deck and the Sultai ramp deck versus like mono black devotion. You just get like all these weird like mishmash of decks, which I'm really looking forward to playing against.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of decks, like there's mono green adventure decks that play lots of big stompy boys, and red deck wins, which plays lots of 1/1s. It's a very Sly-ish deck. For those of you who know what the Sly deck is, it's basically just a bunch of hasty 1/1s and burn spells. So it acts very similarly like that. With cards like Light Up the Stage still just being huge players in Standard. You actually talked about one of my favorite decks to just watch, and it's the food decks. The Jund or Golgari food decks. They run a lot of things that deal with food tokens, and they sacrifice. There's a witch's oven that they can use to sacrifice things, and there's lots of life gain and life drain. Just regular stuff that you would normally see. There's white weenie lists running around. I know that I'm sure you played against them at least at F&M during Theros Standard, the original Theros at least. A lot of the white weenie decks with like Brimaz and all that.
Oh yeah, that was like a really funny story. So back in original Theros Standard, there was a dumb combo deck built around Maze's End, which I really tried to make work. And yeah, it was a terrible deck to say the least. I think I went 1-4 in like the only F&M I ever played it in, but that one win made it all worth it.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with an alternate win con. We spent our main topic of this episode talking about an alternate win con. So
I would say this one is a lot more viable. Versus trying to like set up 10 different gates plus Maze's End, and then having to activate it on your turn to then win the game, and then that thing just dies to fast decks, which was like the white weenie decks during that time, and not even just white weenie. You had like mono blue devotion, mono black devotion, mono white devotion, mono red devotion, mono green devotion, just running me over, and then all the other fast decks to take me out. Like the only thing that I could have had a chance against was I think the Esper control deck at the time, and that's because it couldn't really interact with my my lands. With the exception, I think, of like maybe one or two spells that were like exile target permanent.
Yeah, that makes sense. But now you have all those gates and everything in Pioneer. You could make a scape shift gates deck.
Yeah, I want to do that. Like I want to have scape shift be a little bit more competitive than just focusing on a gates deck. But that's a whole like sidetrack conversation, which I would love to get into, but not here.
But my favorite thing about the Standard is one of the biggest decks that was around during the time where Oko was in Standard is still on top, and that's the Simic Flash deck. I've spent some time playing with this deck a little bit on Arena. I just had enough wild cards, so I just kind of threw it together. And man, does that deck still pack a punch. Like
that. Yeah, this deck is by far one of the most fun things to play with. I really want to build it myself, at least in paper, because I have it on Arena as well. And it's basically Merfolk for standard, with the way Merfolk traditionally plays in modern and sort of in legacy, getting that like tempo feel and tempo vibe.
Yeah, definitely. It's an interesting. It's definitely it. Like you said, it feels very much like Merfolk. I mean, it's you're trying to play as much as you can on your opponent's turn. The one of the big pieces of the deck is Night Pack Ambusher, which actually kind of rewards you for not playing on your turn by giving you a bunch of wolf tokens. And just the speed with which this deck is able to get going, with its growth spirals and its mystical, it just has so many ways to draw cards on top of just Hydroid Krasis and Frilled Mystic, which, let's be honest, that should have been a Merfolk.
Yeah, that would have been a Merfolk if somebody wasn't like over at Wizards, where it's like, all right, we want to get Lizard and Wizard right next to each other.
Yeah.
Make it a Merfolk, it's going to be, Lizard, Merfolk, Wizard, and it's just going to, break everything I want to do. So I can't get mad at them for it. At the same time, I want to get mad at them for just not making it a Merfolk.
It could be a Merfolk Lizard Wizard.
Yeah, well, I mean, it comes down to having to do like a what was I going to say? The alphabetical order of creature types.
Oh, that's fair. Yeah, I didn't think about that, but yeah.
Now, I mean, if someone out there wants to correct me, where they put like the creature race before like the subclasses, which I want to say is how it's supposed to be. But I'm kind of erring on the side of alphabetical order with it. Then there's like no excuse like on WotC's part at that point, where it's like you could have totally made this a Merfolk and you would have just supported like an entire archetype versus giving it to elves that is never going to use a 4 CMC creature.
Yeah, that's fair. But Simic Flash is pretty much built perfectly for it. So there's a tome, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, we will make sure to have that list that we put up for this episode in the show notes. So just check out the show notes if you're wanting to copy paste the deck list for Arena or anything like that. Question for you all who are listening. What have you been doing with Merfolk in Standard? I'm kind of interested to see, because, I mean, we do have a good chunk of Merfolk. I'd like to see some Merfolk lists, like I guess more traditional, blue-greenish Merfolk. But, yeah, send us your deck list. Talk to us about what you're playing. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all the places as @FishCastMTG. And if you have any questions, reach out to us there. If you have a longer form question, feel free to contact us at fishcastmtg@gmail.com. Our cover art was made by Tessa and Hunter Pruitt, and our logo and stream art was done by Ishton on Twitter, with our animated intro by Jake Boss, MTG. If you like what we're doing here, please rate and subscribe in the Apple or Google Play podcast apps, as well as find us on Patreon, patreon.com/fishcastmtg. Dorian, it was fun talking about Standard with you, and we'll have to see about getting you up and running as soon as you get over there.
Yes, like I said to everybody, so I am going to be in the process of starting a new job, and I have to move within 30 days, and that means, shutting down like my entire life that I had set up here for Oklahoma, and then just, transporting it to which is going to end up being Massachusetts. So anybody that's a fish fan in Massachusetts, hit me up on the Discord. Let me know like what's like the best places for a Merfolk enthusiast, and just looking to like restart like an FNM, or just restart Magic out there in general. But yeah, I'm looking forward to starting this hobby up once again. Anything that I did Magic wise was pretty much, what I could, do with my own like judging stuff.
right.
What was it? I think the last time I judged something was back in November.
All right, and that is it for this week, and we will talk to you all next week.
We will see you. And as the great Matt says, good night, everybody.